Hi guys, welcome back. This is Matt Chat number 38, covering one of the best computer role-playing games of the late 80s, Chuck and John Dougherty's The Legacy of the Ancients. Now, The Legacy of the Ancients is not a game that everybody's going to be familiar with. It's unfortunately rather obscure, although it has attracted, of course, a cult following, and you can find these fan websites and so on, people who love and just adore this game. Now, the creators of this game, Chuck and John Dougherty, had been creating role-playing games for some time. In fact, in 1984, they developed a very popular game called Questron. Now, Questron, which was published by SSI, was noted for being a much easier game in terms of the interface, at least, than the game that was inspired by Ultima, specifically Ultima 2, Ultima 3. Now, Questron, though, it wasn't the same. It wasn't just a dumbed-down version of Ultima by any means. In fact, they had actually added some innovations to it, changed the dynamics quite a bit, the gameplay. For one thing, you don't level up with the traditional experience points that we find in so many other games. Instead, you level up by completing quests. Now, another innovation was action arcade-based mini-games that you could play to boost your stats. Now, those items, or those elements, are things that we'll also see in Legacy of the Ancients. Now, by 1987, they had fallen away from SSI, so they had the game published by Electronic Arts, who, in my opinion, did a really good job with the packaging and so on. Now, Legacy of the Ancients is probably the biggest hit, was on the Commodore 64 platform, which far and away has the best graphics and interface. The story here is that you're just this sort of peasant farmer, you're wandering the countryside, you stumble upon this corpse, and although you're not a thief, something compels you to search this body, and on the body you find a leather-clad scroll set and a bracelet and some coins, mysterious coins. Now, before you have a chance to really ponder this or to head to the nearest pawn shop, you're teleported away into this mysterious museum of the ancients. And this building is a very neat structure. It's built by these ancients, I guess some type of ancient alien race. And inside we'll find exhibits, and each of these exhibits, sort of like in Mario 64 or Waxworks, you can actually enter into these exhibits and go to different realms and explore, find more coins, come back, and eventually explore all of the different areas in this museum. It's a very nice way to combine all these different settings. Anyway, before we get into the game, I wanted to briefly mention how I heard about it. Now, this was back, I guess, in the late 90s, maybe early 2000s, and I stumbled upon an internet radio show called Retro Gaming Radio, hosted by a guy named Shane R. Monroe. And I fell in love with this show. It was Shane had so much passion, and he really knew his stuff. And even as the fans who didn't necessarily agree with him, half the fun was going on to the forums and talking about these games with Shane. So I like to think that inspired me to really pursue games at a more serious level. Knowing that there was a guy, knowing that it was acceptable to have this much passion for what other people considered to be a very frivolous hobby, gaming. So anyway, I owe a lot to Shane, so I want to make sure to point him out and thank him for inspiring me. All right then, without further ado, let's play The Legacy of the Ancients. After that nice title music, you find yourself in this 3D museum. And you can walk around and look at the exhibits and get a bit of an idea of what your mission is. But the game really, the story takes off when your bracelet begins to talk to you. It's a telepathic bracelet that tells you about this compendium of wizard knowledge that is threatening the very existence of everything. So our mission, of course, will be to destroy this scroll. Now, this museum is pretty cool, and I like to think a little thought went into it beyond just graphics technology. There seems to be a bit of a meta commentary going on here. Now, whether it was intentional or not, I still think it's pretty cool to think that putting coins into these exhibits to explore these worlds is like putting coins or quarters into an arcade machine to explore a virtual world. So I think that's really cool. And I also think it's nice how the title of this game, Legacy of the Ancients, is so true today. This game itself represents the legacy of Ultima and Questron and Fantasy and games of that era. Now, what we're looking at here is the first world we're going to explore, Thornberry. And that is, you can see there in the distance some smokestacks. This will be a pretty interesting place to explore. And what's even cooler is they're going to give us some free coins that we can spend, sort of like the free tokens that you get at a casino. And indeed, the makers of this game very much seem to enjoy gambling. There's Blackjack and other games of chance. Once we're into the game proper, you can see a screen that looks very comparable to the Ultima 3 that we were looking at earlier, or Questron, as well as a lot of the Japanese role-playing games. It sort of looks quaint today, but actually it's a nice interface simply because it's very easy to see where you're going and get around. Sometimes a 3D first-person interface can be a lot harder to navigate. Now, what I really like about this is I can actually go inside these buildings and see what it looks like on the inside. That's something I really would have liked to have seen in Syndicate, the game I reviewed in the last episode. Now, each of these towns has several different services. I can gamble in some of them. I can get my fortune told. I can get weapons and armor, or try to sell back gear that I found. There's some of them have general stores and healers. And, really, there's going to be a lot of this game will be exploring these different towns because basically each town will have different services and different price structures. Now, like almost any role-playing game, there's going to be some emphasis here on getting better gear. Later on, of course, there'll be more options, but for now, I just have a few things I can look at in different qualities: shoddy, fair, good, and so on. So, of course, it's going to be important to kill enough monsters to get enough gold, or get a little bit of gold and gamble. Now, if you're no good at that ball-dropping game, you can try Blackjack, but in either case, you can, of course, cheat, especially if you have an emulator. Now, another aspect of this game, of course, is food and water. Now, that's something we really don't see very often in modern games. But nevertheless, it's something you always have to think about in these early games, because if you get off in the wilderness and you don't have enough food, you will die. Fortunately, you can occasionally eat the creatures that you kill, so that takes a little of the pressure off. Now, here's what it looks like when I leave the town. And, of course, it's important to have a map handy so you can figure out where these other towns are. But as you can see, there's different types of terrain. They make different sound effects. I travel across them at different speeds. And then occasionally I'll run into a monster. One thing I like about this game is it will tell me where they're coming from, and I can often avoid them. That's a really nice feature for this game in particular because, again, you don't get experience points. You will get some gold, occasionally some food, maybe some items, but it's up to you if you want to fight these guys. But when you get to low on hit points, you'll need to go back to a town and find a healer. Now, here's probably what this game is best known for: these action-based mini-games. And this one is interesting because it sort of tests the player's dexterity at the joystick, and the effect of the mini-game will be that the character in my game gets a higher dexterity. And so it's a nice sort of linking of player and character. Now, this is a very expansive game world. As you can see later on, I can buy this raft or a sailing boat and travel to islands. There's a lot to explore here, and this is just the first world. Think about all of those other exhibits in the museum. This was back in the day when if you bought a game like Legacy of the Ancients, you could expect to play this for weeks, if not months, possibly years on end. These were epics. And that's all for this week's Matt Chat, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you guys next week, but remember, don't feed the Tarmalons!